Hello everyone, I'm James Quinn, President-elect, IOSH, and I'd like to welcome you to today's IOSH webinar, the latest in our series of webinars looking after the mental health and well-being of workers during the COVID-19 crisis. This is the 6th weekly webinar IOSH has hosted, all relate to managing safety, health and well-being throughout the coronavirus crisis. This week's focus is the role of OSH and HR professionals. It's clear that throughout our global effort to protect people from the COVID-19 virus, the safety and health profession, along with the HR profession, it must remain integral to helping organisations start planning what returning to work looks like, how it's done safely and effectively. So today we will address roles, responsibilities, and how OSH and HR professionals can respond by working together to handle new challenges. We will hear real-life examples of how OSH and HR professionals in the UK, Barbados and Saudi Arabia have adapted and are planning for the future. I'm joined by Malcolm Shields and Keith Hall, respectively the Chair and Vice Chair of IOSH's largest sector group, the Construction Group. And we are delighted to welcome HR professional David D'Souza, Director of Membership for the Chartered Institute of Personnel and Development, the CIPD. Before we begin, I want to emphasise that the role of this and all our webinars is to inform and engage with safety and health professionals and others responsible for safety and health at work. This is a two-way channel, giving you also the opportunity to share, support and guide on this evolving issue, wherever you are in the world and whichever industry sectors you're involved in. Welcome all of you, IOSH members, guests alike, and anyone that has come in to try and help and assist and perhaps update us on what you're doing during this pandemic. Let's welcome our first speaker, Keith Hall, Vice Chair of IOSH Construction Group and Director of TSM UK. Keith, can you please share your screen?
So, good morning all. I'm hoping that has worked seamlessly and you can now see what I'm presenting to you. So welcome to this webinar, COVID-19 Return to Work. This first session, we will be presented by Malcolm Shields as the Chair of the IOSH Construction Group and myself. The initial slides I will present and Malcolm will be available for questions afterwards. So one of the things I'm looking at today is the intelligent climb role in the COVID-19. Now, some of the information that I'll be presenting here is best practice from around the world, following the World Health Organization guidelines. What I've undertaken is to cross-check what I'm going to present you with people I've worked with around the globe, from Massa in Saudi Arabia, the water supply company, to the industrial regions. I've spoken to members of the National Advisory Committee on Occupational Safety and Health in Barbados. And in the UK, I've had conversations with the head of construction of Gatwick Airport and also with the team from Southern Water. So the first thing we want to really address here is looking at these organisational responses to COVID-19. As we have had to adapt and work around the new hazards that this is introduced into our working system, what we've had to be careful of is how we have looked at the guidance that's been issued from experts around the world and how that has been introduced in different environments. So to look at these different cultures, the first one perhaps is to look at how in the UK is very much a local employer. Even with expat or foreign workers are still based in the UK. They are resident, and although they may be coming from different parts of the European Union, they do live locally to where they work. Now, the way this has been approached by the government here is where work has stopped, these staff are furloughed with 80% pay supported by the government. And that is the way how the staff have been laid off and have been supported during this drop-off in work. If I just jump down to Saudi Arabia, so Saudi Arabia has had a different challenge in that the majority of their frontline key workers are peripatetic. So this means they would move round the country or place to place and are not perhaps based in that area where they work. They travel to where the work is. So the government in Saudi Arabia, or the royal family, should we say, the Royal Commission, how they have looked after people is they have guaranteed staff 100% of their salary. And to enable close proximity of working and staff to be able to work within a 2-metre area, they are actually putting staff in accommodation almost in family groups, so that people that work on the same shift together, being peripatetic and being that they would normally live together, are making sure that they stay in their shift group outside, therefore to limit the spread of the COVID-19. Now, Barbados has, speaking to them, has always found themselves to be in a very much more delivery focused area rather than a safety based. So Barbados at the moment, following good guidance from IOSH and the Construction Leadership Council, are driving from this delivery to a more safety focus to make sure people have the right information to enable them to work safely. But what you're here for today is how we are going to return to a new normal. So the challenges we do have to look for is how we are going to transition these people back to the workplace. Now, as a client, which is the area I'm approaching it from, you need to make sure you are asking the right questions of subcontractors and contractors that may be working for you within construction. Now, some of the people have approached this by issuing a COVID-19 handbook to contractors to, as a client, request certain requirements from those contractors before they return to work. So this may involve, and we'll look at this in further slides, how people are going to be reinducted onto site, how the construction plan may have changed in terms of additional hazards or working practices that have been affected by COVID-19. And as well as that, these will include key strategic and tactical questions that need to be answered by contractors. With this downturn as well, and as you transition and programs changing, cash flow will change in the way, engagement to small businesses. And I think one of the considerations that has to be given when you are looking at how you replan these events is looking after those specialist contractors that are significant to your project. I will put a proviso on this, is I am very much construction based, and these items I am focusing on much how we're addressing these things within the construction industry. But we will go on during the Q&A how these items that we are discussing here now can also be adapted for working with people in office and working with people in different industries. So when you want to ask these right questions, you do need to look at having a team of people that are working there to help look at how these items I've just spoken about are addressed. So we do need to look at a working group, and some of the key agenda items I would make sure that you are discussing at a strategic and management level are ensuring how COVID-19 will affect your project plan, how it's going to affect the well-being of your staff, how it will affect the ongoing cash flow of any business in the construction program, how you're going to address death in service, so therefore people that do have die due to COVID-19. That will have a great driver on the morale of your staff. And this is something you need to make sure that you have got in a plan and that you're ready to address to ensure that the health, safety and well-being of all staff is looked after. And ultimately, what will the new normal be when you move back into this industry? So as we've got HR as well, I think one of the things we have to understand is you need to look at, when you are setting up this working group, is do you have the right people in the room to discuss these items for the reawakening of these projects? So as OSH professionals, Now, I have given a reference here at the bottom. So I was kindly given permission by Turner and Townsend to use these 10 bullet point headings from their chic guidance note. And these again are duplicated within IOSH and within the Construction Leadership Council guidance. So you will find that a lot of the good guidance reflects these 10 bullet points. So when you are looking at bringing people back safely into construction, is some of the key tactical items that you need to address are conducting a thorough site inspection, update the site plan and construction plan. And this is not just in the UK, this is wherever you are undertaking construction globally. Look at your travel routes and set down areas. So do you need to put in one-way systems for staff as well as plant and vehicles to make sure that staff are not having to walk past each other and breach that safe social distancing? So look, plan ahead, identify and risk assess any further controls that are having to be brought in because of the COVID-19 issue. Make sure all your statutory and routines or inspections are in place. Despite sites having been stood down, you still need to ensure these sites are safe to start up. Have you checked lifting operations? Have you checked valves and isolation? Have you checked that security fencing is still in place? We must make sure that as we start plants back up, that they are safe to do so. I do have to, and to those that have watched the news, there is concern this morning that the incident that has occurred in India was down to an unsafe startup procedure. However, until further news is out, it's probably best not to comment. Looking at, is the site cleansed and sanitised? Are people able to enter, and are your cleaning regimes correct for that time? Just excuse me. Now, when staff return, they are returning to a very, very different world. There is a new normal. You will need to re-induct and ensure that social distancing rules are clear and enforced. This may be through additional guidance, posters, or training. Ultimately, checking employer and subcontractor qualifications. It's worth noting that training for staff that are laid off can still be undertaken and should be undertaken to make sure people do not have skills fade or skills fatigue. Many, many courses now have transitioned across to e-learning to ensure these refreshers are in place, and ultimately revisit the programme of works you have in place. I've just had a comment come up on my screen, and I will note, so one of the items I did not mention there was item 7, I apologise. We do need to make sure, do you have the right safety critical staff for people retaining? Now that involves things like your health and safety. That will involve first aiders, fire wardens, and many, many other roles that are safety critical to good operations. So as I move to my penultimate slide, the thing that I want to talk about here is ensuring, and why we're here today, is collaborating with HR professionals. In many safety instances, this change that has happened in the world will look at the well-being, and it is not often that well-being features so heavily in your health and safety undertakings. So therefore, as a safety professional, it is vital that you are working with your human resources department and occupational health to look at some of these key concerns with people returning. You are going to find in construction that construction industry, the latest figures I've reviewed, 99% of the construction industry is male. And you are going to find that these are asymptomatic people. People in construction are more likely to smoke and have unhealthy diets because of the peripatetic nature of sites. They are known to have higher blood pressure and be more likely to have diabetes. And you may also find you have an aging workforce. These people are asymptomatic. They will not be displaying these symptoms outwardly. However, this does put them at higher risk of COVID-19. And so therefore, with these 4 items, you do need to make sure you are working with HR on how you are going to protect your asymptomatic high-risk staff. As we covered in the previous slide, we must ensure training is still completed while staff are not working. So there are e-learning, webinars, ensuring you maintain that communication with staff not at work, and move your site safety focus from enforcement to being more about engage, educate, explain, and encourage. Safety is a team game, and we must ensure that we work on this together. And finally, something that is of key consideration is the mental health of the staff that will be returning. Some people may have lost staff and family to COVID-19. Some people will find that working in isolation is their preferred way to work. And you may find people, through fear of contracting COVID-19, have become agoraphobic and do not actually want to return to work. All these items must be addressed. So I think what I want to sum up here is, as OSH professionals, we need to double down and we need to regroup and do what we're best at. And this is ensuring that we are delivering a suitable plan, that we're delivering it on time, we're making sure it's delivered properly, and we're reviewing any actions that come out of this. So with that, I would like to hand across to David, who will address some of these items from an HR perspective.
Okay, just one moment there. Thanks very much, Keith. For those of you that are not aware, and thank you very much for that, Keith, I would like to now introduce you to David D'Souza, who's the Director of Membership at the Chartered Institute of Personal and Development. David, welcome to our webinar today, and thank you so much for giving up your time.
Thanks, it's a delight to be here. I'm not actually in my office. I need to point this out to people. This is what the office normally looks like, but it's a Zoom background. It's currently got only 4 or 5 people in it. They're our IT team, and they're doing some things that can only be done on site. Really great intro from Keith, and I want to kind of elaborate, I suppose, on some of the things that HR teams are doing and facing at the moment, but also that importance of collaboration, which is absolutely key to the way that we approach what's not only a business issue and a people issue, but actually it's a societal issue. So we have a whole raft of things that we're trying to juggle and make sense of that have come at us incredibly quickly. And it gives an opportunity for professions that maybe haven't worked as closely together in the past as they should have or could have, to genuinely start thinking about each other's skills and capabilities in a different way and making sure that collaboration is happening effectively. And I think Keith's point, most broadly, was that if you do the right thing, if you follow a clear process, and if you use the right expertise and collaboration to get a rounded view of the problem, most of the things that we're looking at here are solvable. They are dealable with, you can address them, and you can try and create a situation where not only is it safe for people to return to work, but people feel safe returning to work. And that's one of the things we're looking at as an institute, is doing quite a bit of reporting and research on how people feel about the potential return to work, because that plays into the mental well-being angle in a really important way. Because you can do everything well, but if you don't communicate that well, you don't connect with people well, and they don't feel involved and that they've got a voice, that's probably going to be a challenge in terms of the employment relationship that you have with them, which is based on trust. So in HR, we've seen over the past 6 weeks or so, and it's been very difficult to remember. I think we're now in coronavirus time, where everything feels almost impossible to kind of keep track of. So I lose track of whether I spoke to someone a week ago or a month ago. But what HR teams have seen, and I will talk in a very broad multi-sector way, and it's worth noting that many organisations have that combination of different environments. So they might have an office environment, they might have retail environments, warehouses, with different levels of risk and different profiles. But what we've seen in HR is an incredible need to react quite rapidly to the economic situation, and some of the things like furlough that have happened in the UK, and similar schemes worldwide, where actually we're having to operate with employees in a very different way and make sense of guidance very rapidly. And the changing guidance has been a real challenge. And I think one of the things that was raised at the start of this webinar, which is really pertinent, which is that any of the advice that we give today, beyond the general principles, is quite likely to be superseded over the next few days by further guidance from the UK government. And that's around the guidance in each individual workplace state, as far as they can. as to what they'll be looking for in terms of organisations making that safe. So we're doing this, I think, at a really good time to talk about a general approach, but with the knowledge that over the next few days, we may get some more detail coming out from government. What you've also seen in HR, and this is where I think there's a potential for, again, more collaboration across organisations, is an incredible digital shift. So people going from not being able to work at home to being able to work at home almost instantly. And that brings with it a raft of challenges around their well-being in an environment other than the office or other than their normal place of work, and only works in some sectors. But we've certainly seen that acceleration of technology deployment. And one of the things that that's taught us, I think, speaking to a range of HRDs, is how quickly organisations can act when they're focused, and how well they can act when actually everyone in the organisation has a clear problem that they need to solve together. And that comes back to that point of collaboration. I think it's really key. We've had to do similar, probably to OSH professionals, which is really rapid kind of policy creation for the organisation, and getting very clear very rapidly on what our tolerances are in different situations. And most importantly, I think possibly, and I'll come back to some general principles at the end, but appreciating the uniqueness of each context. There isn't a one-size-fits-all solution to the problems that we're facing, and it's up to every organisation to ascertain risk, ascertain opportunity in a really complex system where you have a host of things at play, and infectiousness probably more at play than it has been historically. Or that's probably a vast understatement, but certainly that's a massive challenge, is the implications for people's families as well, and their loved ones, of the actions that we're currently taking. But it can be done. So what we've also seen is many organisations finding ways to work safely and support their employees and support their customers, or their kind of end goals as organisations. They have been doing it throughout this crisis. So the problem is solvable, and the problem is manageable if we come together and solve it with every angle covered in terms of the way that people are looking at it. So we know from actually our work at the CIPD that people are keen to get back to work, and there'll be a number of reasons for that. Some of them will be financial, some of them will be social, some of them will be about well-being. But we're reaching a point where organisations will see a pressure from people potentially to want to come back in. The government will, in the UK, be slowly opening up for people to come back in. And it's critical that people come back to an environment that is safe for them, come back to an environment that is supportive for them, and come back to an environment that actually they understand the dynamics of, because it's quite likely in some cases that it will be quite unsettling coming back to work if it looks entirely different to the workplace that you left in terms of the standards, routines, or some of the kind of social interactions that you might have. So even just down to the kind of psychology of the fact that in most cultures, there's a standard distance that will stand away from people to have a conversation. It's only 2 meters if you really hate them. So it's going to feel very different coming back into some offices. And whilst that may not seem a safety critical problem, and when we start thinking a broader way about people's well-being and what they're going through at the moment with this change of lifestyle that we've all gone through, that will be an incredible change. And that's one, again, where it's a collaboration point with HR. Many HR teams have been introducing employee assistance helplines, wellbeing outlines, meditation apps, and there will be a different sense of appetite from individuals within organisations and different sectors as to take up of that. But what is clear is that what's happening at the moment isn't just an infectious disease is impacting people, but actually it's a complete change of lifestyle and interaction, and that is impacting people in very, very different and marked ways. So in terms of going back to work, there's a few things that organisations need to do. One of which is have really clear two-way communications and be absolutely clear on that. And that then brings into play probably internal communications, depending on where it might sit in your organisation or if you have that function, but it is absolutely about clarity. So if you want people to come back and you want them to feel safe, it's not just about doing the things that make them feel safe, it's about assuring them and being really crystal clear on what those steps are, that one, they need to follow and they need to obey to keep others safe, but secondly, what steps of the organisation time and building that trust through those conversations. And you need to be really clear on the steps that have been taken, to what extent they follow guidance, the rationale for those things, in probably a way that people haven't been concerned about before, depending on your sector. So for many sectors, it wouldn't have been a concern, and then suddenly it was an all-enveloping problem that most of us have faced into. And then the other thing we need to look at is anxiousness versus mental health issues. So we know that actually a large number of people are keen to come back into the workplace, but we also know that there are a number of people that will be anxious about returning to the workplace. And at the point it's possible, we need to think about the mechanics and the conversations that need to happen to help them get to a point where actually they're comfortable working from home. And then the final thing would be, working back in their normal environment. And then the final thing that HR teams are obviously collaborating with IT teams and other parts of organisations on is, sorry, that's my doorbell, which doesn't normally happen in the office, in fairness, is thinking about actually different working practices. So probably less for construction to some extent, with the exceptions that Keith kind of ran through in terms of potential differences that you might want to do. But actually, if you're office-based workers, do you need to be back in the office at all? And we're already hearing from organisations that actually are saying for the next 2 years, they're planning not to go back. They will find a different way to solve that problem. So there's a whole kind of raft of things that are happening there in terms of support, but in terms of understanding the external landscape and the impact it has on people. And people have faced physical risks, and that's something that your HR team probably actually aren't expert in at all, and they really need your help on. So we are brilliant, I like to think, at getting you paid on time normally, or getting that turnaround if we don't do it. We are good at writing procedures. We are good at bringing people into organisations, onboarding, all of those things. If you've got a disciplinary, we'll be there. Global pandemic isn't something that we had on our list. But we need to understand actually and rely on the experts when it comes to thinking about safety in a very different way for organisations. And that's why that collaboration is so key, because I am hearing really positive things about the HR profession at the moment. You hear some horror stories occasionally about the way we've spoken to or addressed people, but broadly speaking, it's been a really good time for our profession to step up and make a difference. But actually what we found is we're far more reliant on the rest of the organisation and their expertise and their perspective to solve some of the problems that we were never trained for, and that don't sit within our scope, but absolutely overlap with the challenges that we have. So at the CIPD, we're calling out a number of kind of key principles that we want organisations to think about as they go back to work, and happy to talk about some more of these and some of the implications of them when we come to the questions, and I can see them mounting up, so I won't take too much of your time, and I know that Keith was quite rapid as well as we went through. The first of which is simply know your business, and we'll be asking our practitioners to do that, which is understand the unique context of your business and understand that generic guidelines that have been published probably will work as a starting point for what you need to do, but actually the assessment of risk and the assessment of the best way of going about solving problems for the organisation are probably going to be far more localised. And that is a challenge actually for HR as a discipline. I think it's needed to get a lot closer to genuine business operations in certain sectors for a long time, and it's an opportunity to do that. But we need to know how the business works in a lot of detail to be able to actually start solving for that with other people. Second one is put people first. And it's really difficult at the moment because we're juggling the economic reality of what's happening and people's desire to get back to work and desire to be productive. With the fact that actually we're looking at a disease that kills people, and not only kills people directly, but potentially we can be vectors and spread it to other people. And I think Keith touched on kind of the profile of the construction industry and the potential risks there. But almost all of us will know someone who is a risk at the moment. So how we manage that process through and how we make sure that we understand that actually people's lives are more important than companies' profits at the moment, but they needn't be mutually exclusive, and we can keep people safe and we can get back to work. I think that's the trick. So keeping people front of mind, keeping people's safety, keeping people's well-being right at the top of the agenda, whilst trying to find our way back to some degree of normality in terms of economic activity. The next one we've got is be flexible, and that's because people are different, working environments are different. So finding different ways of working for people, whether in some organisations that will be staggering shifts, in other organisations that might be thinking very differently around the composition of teams or the usage of technology. We have an opportunity to really think from a pretty base level in many, many different sectors and working environments, how things can be done differently. So taking this opportunity to do things in a different and potentially better way seems to make sense from a business point of view and from an individual point of view. If we can cut down people's commutes, if we can cut down the level of stress people are under, that can only be a healthy thing.
David, can I start asking you to wind up?
Yeah, certainly. And final 2 points. One, to be inclusive, so to look at individual issues and to have the conversations that people have that sit behind those. And finally, to be open in terms of communications. There's never been a more important time for people to know exactly where you stand and for you to be absolutely clear on what you're trying to do. So I will finish up there because I know we have a raft of questions.
That's wonderful, and thank you very much. Absolutely great for you to take the time in there, David. And I think we've got a lot of questions to get through. So let's just kick off straight away. It's over to you, our guest watching today, to start going through the questions. So the first question that I'll get out straight away, and I'm going to get this question straight away to Keith. So I'm just going to have another quick look at the.
Just confirm you can hear me.
Yeah, I can hear you. Just to get a quick one out to Malcolm. Just thinking about what we've been talking about, Malcolm, so far in terms of the construction side of things. There's a couple of questions that have come through, and one of the questions that came through more or less straight away as soon as we started was one from a chap called Wayne. And he's asking, what are the recommendations in respect to construction workers carrying out tasks where social distancing cannot be maintained?
Okay, thanks, Jimmy. Hope everybody can hear me there. I think in terms of construction workers and the tasks that they have to carry out, it's been quite clear from the start that certainly in the UK, and it's my experience in a lot of other countries, that the authorities wanted construction to continue as much as possible because it's part of the economy, and they try and keep things ticking over. There's some clear guidance out there now, which has come out from the CLC and the CIC in the UK after discussions at the top level with the cabinet, and that revolves around getting construction workers back. In the situation where they can't comply fully with the social distancing guidelines, particularly the 2 meters, etc., then you must look at that on a task-based approach. First of all, the questions I would be asking is that piece of work, is it essential to the program? Is it on the critical path? Can it not be pushed further down the program when the social distancing measures can be relaxed, and when the spread of the virus is much more controlled and at a very low level? So can it be pushed further down the program? So you must ask that question first. If it can't in the program and it's essential, it's on the critical path, and maybe it's a safety critical task, well then you have to drop back from the being able to segregate as part of that hierarchy of control in 2 meters, and you go back down to relying on the PPE, briefing the guys very clearly, no skin contact, etc., stuff like that, and making sure that it's of as a short duration as possible. And if it's a task that is in too long a duration, then you need to break it up and keep that time when people have to spend any close contact as minimal as possible with the correct PPE or RPE being worn.
Can I just
thanks very much for that, Malcolm. But let's move on now to Keith. Keith, we had a question for you that came in sort of around training, and it was Keith that brought that question in. We'll take some of your responses later on, Keith, and the rest of the panel. When we do a summary, we'll quickly come back to you. So please keep a note of that one, Keith. But another Keith came in with a question today. How do IOSH expect a training organisation like mine, as a sole trader, to return delivering training at clients' premises?
So various training companies I've been working with have been approaching this in different ways. Feeding on from perhaps Malcolm's response to the construction one, you are looking at the same controls that should be in place for both office, construction sites and training. You have to look at how you can maintain this social distancing while delivering the training. If you can't maintain the social distancing while training, then you need to look at the hierarchy of controls which are established in both the management regs and the principles of prevention within the European directives on how you are going to ensure that you can maintain good social distancing. If you can't do that, how you're maintaining good hygiene. And if you can't do that, what additional controls do you need to put into place to protect people? COVID-19 is a hazard that has been introduced to our workplace. So if you are delivering training, look at how you can break that training down. Can you undertake some of it via e-learning? Can you change some of it to blended learning? And there where you do need the close proximity, what additional controls can you put into place? I do know there's a challenge with some training companies I've spoken to that they've had to halve their class sizes to ensure that there's suitable separation in a classroom environment or within a practical session. But ultimately, whenever you're going to undertake an activity, go back to those general principles of prevention and how you can implement the guidance that is issued by the World Health Organization.
Thanks very much, Keith, and I hope that helps answer Keith's question there as well. And again, panelists, please write down some notes if you want to you'll have a quick minute to summarise at the end of the session. But this question is now for you, David. It's come from someone, I can't actually read the name, but it's a really good question for you. To David, the role of HR is usually as a tool used by the business to help manage and control the workforce. How will this role change post-lockdown? Very interesting.
I think it's a really fair question, and I think the history of HR started off with that kind of conception of attempting to control workforces. The modern HR kind of ethos is about enabling organisations to do what they need to do and finding the best way of doing that and helping people be productive. I think this enables actually a lot of the way that we work normally to shift and for people to rethink it. And I'm hoping that's a really good opportunity for HR to ditch any of those associations around control. And of course, same as many other professions, we need to keep some stuff legal. So it doesn't mean that we're going to start bending all of the rules. But actually, when HR professionals go in, they should be trying to work out how to help an organisation be a success, not to how to squash people. And now's as good a time as any to kind of really show people that that is the case.
And I do think that exactly what you just said there, David, that the role of the HR at this present time, now more than ever, is going to be so challenging for you as the HR professionals, but also, you know, to assist those that in work are possibly not going forward is going to be something that you'll be looking at. So yeah, a wonderful answer, thank you. Malcolm, I'm going to come back to you now, please, if you don't mind. We've got a great question here from Mark with a C. Hi, what is the guidance around travelling in vehicles 2-3 seaters? I think that I get asked this question a lot as well, Malcolm.
Yeah, good question. Thank you, Mark. Yeah, I think there's a link obviously to the existing social distancing guidelines, and they talk about you know, obviously primarily, first of all, it would be fantastic if you just had one person in a vehicle traveling to and from work. That cannot always be the case. So what you have to do is there's some excellent there's some excellent guidance out there from the CIF, the Construction Industry Federation, and they approach this in a really good way, and they've produced a standard operating procedure, and within it talks about getting people to and from work, so that commute part of the day, and they talk about if there's going to be more than one person, the type of vehicle, where they should sit, whether they should wear masks or not. So I would definitely recommend that to Mark and point them in the direction of that document. And if somehow we can get Mark's details or whoever needs it, and maybe as part of after this we can pass that information on. But that's what one person. But if there needs to be more than one person, then that document is an excellent document, and that would apply all over the world in terms of the seating arrangements and how many people you should have in a vehicle. That's how you should approach it.
Thank you, Malcolm. Yeah, a good answer. I hope that helps, Mark. You know, it's a good answer. Thank you very much. I'm going to come back to you, Keith, if I may. There's a couple of questions that I think that are sort of come really aligned to yourself, and it's not another one on training, but it's one that I think that will help a lot of people in terms of the big question that's being asked. It's a sort of elephant in the room, I would say. PPE requirements, Keith, non-medical employment.
I do have to come back. So PPE is your last measure of defence when you are looking at any activity that's undertaken. You should look at environmental controls, physical controls and procedure before you dictate PPE. PPE is your last line of defence. If to manage the requirements of COVID-19 and the hazard it introduces, that PPE is your final option, then that should be risk assessed and introduced. So in the medical environment, if you look at the PPE that's been worn then, it is of a significant different standard to the PPE that's being worn by people that are undertaking this mobile testing. So in the medical environment, they have gowns, they have face shields, and they're using FFP3, which is the highest standard of filtration, face masks. Whereas if you look at what the WHO is recommending, where they are saying face masks should be worn for all, this is to actually protect other people from you breathing out a virus if you are asymptomatic. So in terms of PPE in a non-medical environment, you do need to go back and look, what is the risk that COVID-19 is presenting? And are you protecting the individual, or are you actually using the PPE to shield the individual from spreading the virus? There is no one size fits all, but please do look at what is the hazard that COVID-19 has introduced to your workplace and to your individual.
And of course, guidance as well, Keith, yes?
Yeah, I think, Jimmy, just to say, you know, to look at the 5 steps of risk assessment, the first one is who might be harmed and how. And that is the question people need to ask. That's the first question at any time with this issue.
Thanks very much, Keith. Well answered. David, if I may, I would like to come back to you, please. I was going to sort of let everyone into a little secret, but there's a lot of questions coming in from you. You're going to be very busy after this presentation, so prepare to give up your weekend, I think. So we have a great question from Eugene, and this is probably my favourite question so far. Employees are worried about being furloughed and then thought of as a surplus to requirements if their companies have a good lockdown.
Yeah, I mean, that's not probably an observation rather than a question, but it's probably not an unfair one. So our research would suggest that currently furloughing is about 2/3 of the people currently furloughed. Employers say they would have had to let go otherwise. So it is more than likely that when we come out of this period of furlough being available, and that may have changed depending on when you listen to this kind of webinar, but it's more than likely that yes, there will be redundancies, and yes, that group will be disproportionately impacted. However, these are pretty unique circumstances. It's good that furlough existed at all. So it's really, you know, it's easy for people to have that support and then dwell on what may happen next. But actually, normally we wouldn't have had that safety net in the economy whatsoever. So it is a fair observation to say that yes, some people on furlough will be vulnerable because organisations will find ways to get by. But at the very least, at the moment, we do have that support, and it's good support.
Very honest and transparent question answer. Thanks very much, David. Malcolm, I'm going to come back to you, please, if I may. Panelists, I'd just like to say so far, thanks very much. Some of these answers are being given are very, 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 very good, and I'm sure the folks that are viewing us are taking a lot from it. And remember, the questions that we don't answer, we will have answers to. Either go back to IOSH, team will have a look at them, and then we'll go from there as well. So Malcolm, I've got another great question here. This is from David. And I'm sorry to keep putting you on the spot, but this is a great one. Surely due to the risk factors you have just identified, construction sites should not be allowed to open at the moment.
Oh, okay. Good question, David. Thanks, Jimmy. Yeah, it's quite clear that there was a mixture of, and not enough clear guidance at the start of this when this unfortunate pandemic started, and in different times in different countries. And people weren't sure what to do, particularly about construction sites. They at the moment, the government are quite clear here, and Keith, you might want to just make a note of this and chip in at the end, please. Some of your experiences talking abroad, but that construction site should operate as long as they can operate safely within the social distancing guidelines. So I'm working with lots of clients and contractors, and we have either reopened in the last week, 2 weeks, or we're in the planning stages to reopen sites. And very simply, you must go back, look at the site, think about how complex is that site, what it does involve. Is it essential or critical work for the client? Is it essential or critical work for the infrastructure in this country, etc.? And make decisions on whether you can restart. But certainly, construction sites can work, David. That would be my clear answer to you. But they must be able to demonstrate that they can do so in a safe manner. So either they can clearly demonstrate that they operate those social distancing guidelines, or that where they can't, they have either stopped certain tasks or they can move them in the program. And you don't have to reinvent the wheel here. If you just think, we have the Health and Safety at Work Act, Section 2, we have the management regs, and we have a duty of care. As long as you're referencing back to those and then demonstrating through your risk assessments, method statements, plans of work, this is how we can do it, then they're not, the site can be done. One final thing I would say on it is, certainly when they produced the latest version of the CIC and CLC site operating procedures, within there they added in the fact about having to monitor the new control measures in the way that you're working regularly and daily. So you must be, if you're a client, you must be asking the contractor. If you're a contractor, you must be thinking about this. If you're a health and safety or an OSH professional advising clients, make sure you ask those questions and ask the contractor, how will you monitor this situation, and then record it and report it and make sure that it's staying consistent so we operate safely.
So just to add to that, Malcolm, and what you're saying about the client, I've had conversations with legal chambers on the client responsibilities in the UK, and I think it is worth reinforcing that client point, because under CDM Regulation 4, the client has the responsibility. They can delegate the duty to the principal contractor, but it is still the client's responsibility to ensure that site is safe. And that is also within the Mobile Works Directive in Europe. I think as well, people need to understand what they view as construction. Some companies I'm working at the moment are undertaking land capping of landfill or topsoil spreading. Now that will involve a single occupant in a excavator or a tractor or a spreader. So therefore, by very nature of the work he's doing, he is isolated. And we need to think, when we talk construction, it is a huge undertaking. Please look at the task-specific activity, because you may find some tasks in construction are already able to be undertaken safely with very little change.
Okay, thank you very much for that, gentlemen. I'm going to come to you, Keith. Just before I do come to you, but I have had a comment from one of the Irish council members, Kieran Delaney, who's letting us know that Ireland are operating slightly differently. May 18th. I missed the message. I just missed the message there, Kieran, but I think that was around 10. If it's not, please make sure you write a message to me and scold me. So, okay, Keith, coming to you. Another really interesting question. Is it really reasonably practicable, love those words, for them to expect businesses to report riddors for a global virus that is out of control?
Right, there is actually, so thank you for that, Jimmy. There is very clear guidance on this. The HSE has, now if you've got access to the internet, which you're watching us, so I'm sure you have, if you Google HSE riddor reporting coronavirus, they have issued a guidance note on when the coronavirus should be reported. There are only two situations. So there is exposure to a biological agent, which is Regulation 7, Schedule 2. And this is someone, for example, a lab worker working with coronavirus to create a vaccine might drop a vial of coronavirus that then would infect people. So that is exposure to a biological agent, very, very specific. The other one is work-related fatalities. So this is about where there is a clear link that due to exposure to known coronavirus, that person has died. So we mentioned earlier that most coronavirus fatalities in the workplace will be classed as death in service, which means it's the same as someone dying of flu, it's the same as someone suffering a heart attack at work. It's not a work-related fatality. The only time it could be a work-related fatality is, for example, doctors or nurses working directly with coronavirus infected persons. And in that situation, that there is a clear link between the exposure of the individual who's died and coronavirus. And remember, in all workplace incidents, it must be shown that there is a unique event that can be identified that caused the riddor report. So just to go there, so please do have a look at the guidance online from the HSE. It is available on Google. If you Google HSE riddor COVID-19, it will take you straight to their briefing note.
Thank you very much, Keith. Okay, we're sort of coming to the end, and I'm conscious we've got about 6 minutes left. I just wonder, I'm going to give you a question now that I'd like all of you to have an input into, just having a quick chat about it. And I'm just trying to, here we go. Okay. All of you, this question is to. Okay. With regards to returning to sports stadiums, we can happily socially distance spectators by reducing capacity by half or 2/3. But how do you prevent people getting up to go for some food, to the toilet, to stretch your legs? And what do we have to do if we need to evacuate the stadium safely? So if you could take this one first, Keith, and then if you have an input, David, and then Malcolm. Thank you. And 1 minute each, please, gentlemen. A minute.
I'll be watching you, James. You can wave a hand at me. The closing of sports stadiums, bars, restaurants and other social gatherings is something that's been undertaken by the government to ensure the populace health, because they understand that these controls are difficult. Health and safety will take an active part when these sites are reopened to ensure the health, safety and well-being of everyone not in their employ. That's something that we as OSH professionals need to work with. However, the decision to reopen will be something dictated by the government, by their scientific advisors, and based on the good populace health. For the same reason, seatbelts are mandated, motorcycles are mandated, and speed limits are introduced. There is a safety driver behind this, but the far greater driver is it in the public interest? And that, unfortunately, we will have to wait to see what the government's view is on that.
Okay, thanks, Keith. And David, do you have any input?
Only a really quick input, which is I'd agree with Keith that it will be government mandated. It will probably only take place at the point where what's been described there is low risk. And so I think whilst that problem remains a problem, I don't think we're in any danger of going back to mass events, live sport, that kind of placing. I think it would only be when we get to a really, really low kind of level of chance of infection that we get anywhere near a decision to start going back to scale events.
Brilliant. And Malcolm, just a final answer to Gene's question.
Yeah, I would just agree with David there. I don't see any time soon us having to deal with an issue or a problem like that or a challenge like that. I think it'll be a few months government-led, and by that time, the context and way that you ask and answer a question will be different.
Absolutely, a great response there from all three. Thanks. Sorry,
just want to add one last bit on that, Jimmy, is the government will be looking at this number called R.
Okay.
R is how many people can be infected for one person. And until that number is very low, I can't see anything.
Yeah, it's at 0.5 at the moment, isn't it? And we get those in the government briefings. Thanks again, David. David, I'm conscious that you're our guest today as well from outside of IOSH, so I'm going to throw you another quick question while the other two just get ready to summarise. Got 3 minutes left. I want to use every valuable minute. And this question has just come in, and I think it's worth asking. What guidance has been given by the CIPD to their members with regard to extra latitude to take account of the abnormal stressors experienced by staff on the shop floor?
So we've got, I may as well plug it now. If anyone's interested in any HR issues, we've got a dedicated coronavirus hub that we set up, but it's open to anyone who isn't a member because we thought it was important to make that kind of publicly available. And you'll find guidance there on everything from wellbeing to some of the questions I know people have asked around guidance around workers and who can be expected to come in and who can't. And we update that every single day. So have a bob on that for, I know there are some other questions outstanding for me. The hub will have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just a quick one before I start wrapping up, come to each of you for your summary. You can catch up on your summary now. We've got about 15 seconds each. I'd just like to say that earlier on I said we'd get back to you with all the questions, but a lot of these questions will help us form guidance going forward in the future. I was corrected earlier on, so thank you very much for that, Louise. So, Keith, and I'll leave you to last, Keith, because you'll take the longest. Malcolm.
Does that mean I'll take the shortest, Jimmy?
Yeah, you're short and sharp. Malcolm Shields, Malcolm from Shields,
Yeah, two quick things. And one, any conversations involved in discussions, giving guidance about returning to work, whether that's construction, office, retail, whatever, just make sure you take that risk-based led approach. Remember, statute law is held in a higher regard than contract law. So people first, remember that. And also think about what's happened during this and the people that have been working from home. Can we help them in the future by introducing more flexible working? Some of these individuals will have actually benefited from working at home during part of this period. So please talk to your people, talk to your staff. Can you alter things so that we can actually have a bit more flexible working and working from home to help those individuals? You'll certainly get a more productive individual, I believe.
Thank you very much, Malcolm. Brilliant. And again, there's a word that's joining up all of this that we've been talking about today. Please, David.
Yeah, it's all about the people. So, our final advice would be, put people first, know your business and the context. So yes, there will be guidelines coming out, but you're making the individual judgment calls within that guidance. Be flexible, be as inclusive as you can, because everyone's in a different situation at the moment. And finally, just be open with those communications and clear on what you need and clear on what people can expect. And then the final note, just because of this webinar, is now is as good a time as any for people that are passionate about people and safety to come together and try and solve these problems together rather than as individual disciplines. So, it's a really good opportunity for us to have a strength together that keeps going when hopefully the world gets a bit closer to normal.
Okay, we're running out, but some of our guests are leaving us now. So finally, Keith, let's see if you can join up the dots here. You've got the second final word.
I just want to say, I quite often say safety is a team game. We need to work together to make sure people are safe. But in this time, let's look at it that health, safety and well-being of all the people we support is a team game. And it's working with HR, working with other people and having these discussions which are going to help us get everyone home safe.
tied it up perfectly there, Keith. I don't think I'm going to do much better after that. That's fantastic. The one thing, just before I sign off, is that thank you so much to everyone for attending today. Members, IOSH members, guests alike, I hope it's been useful to you. We've gone back to, you can see some of the slides there that are coming up. Also, what I'd like to say is the one word I think I pulled out of a lot of that, and I kept writing it down, was people. People, people, people. And the questions were asked about the people, the answers came back were about the people, and we all came back with that final response, people. Thank you so much, and stay safe. And again, thank you so much for the panel. Well done. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much.
And goodbye.